Just when you think you're going to be able to catch your breath, another scandal hits the Trump campaign. This time, the New York Times is reporting that a memo written by former FBI Director Comey details that Trump did try to pressure him to end the Flynn investigation. Is this the smoking gun that anti-Trumpers and the media have been looking for? Or is this more unsubstantiated hearsay? Nobody's seen this memo yet. Does it exist? Do tapes exist? Also, it looks like we now know where the intelligence came from that President Trump allegedly disclosed to the Russians. It's worse than I thought it would be. It's one of the closest allies we have. But the question is that true, or is that a smokescreen? And if it is true, did any of this even happen? Vladimir Putin says it didn't. And he, quote, has transcripts that he'll hand over to the media to prove it. This begs the question, how does he have transcripts of a closed-door meeting within the walls of the Oval Office? Did the Russians bug that meeting? The world's upside down. Let's try to make sense of it right now in the think tank. Let's start with what we know. I guess, Aubrey, we start with you. Tell me about the Comey letter.
Sure. So they found notes, associates of Comey found notes from his meeting with Trump where he had basically said, hey, we'd like you to stop the investigation of Flynn since he's already resigned. And basically said, rather than focus on that, we want you to focus on the reporters that are leaking information. So it's just another case of, hey, what are we hiding, and why does this keep coming up over and over again? Okay, now
we're pretty sure, as much as we can be sure of anything today, we're pretty sure this happened because he has a long history of when he thinks something is wrong, he makes a contemporaneous notes, meaning making notes as soon as he leaves the Oval Office. He made notes at the time. They should be probably electronic, so they're dated and timed at when he wrote those notes. So we know, if they produce them, that this is true. It is in his character and in his history to do this, but we haven't seen them.
I was looking at the New York Times article. I don't think Woodward and Bernstein would have touched this, to be honest. I don't even know why this was even printed. So basically, it sounds like a few of Comey's friends or associates called a New York Times reporter and go, well, we can't show it to you, but
we can
this
read
is
it.
A part of it. Huh?
But we can read it to you.
Right. Yeah. So, and it's not the full, it wasn't even the full memo. They said it was parts of a memo. So I'm not even going to talk about context at the moment. We'll leave context out of it. But how can you even report that unless, I mean, if this were Woodward and Bernstein, I'm sure they would have said, okay, great, let me see it. If you can't give it to me, if you can't fax it to me, I at least have to see it. They didn't even ask that. They reported it as this is truth.
Let me give you an example on this. As many people know, I just went through a lawsuit it was a First Amendment right, and I had government documents that we had government leaks giving us documents, and some documents that we could not take. We said at the time, well, we can't trust you on that. And these were long-time sources that we knew were buttoned up. We can't trust you on that. We actually had to fly somebody down to Washington to stand there and look at the computer screen, show it to me before we could report. And the judge even said that wasn't good enough.
Wow.
So how is the New York Times printing this story?
I think this goes to the credibility of the media, too, or the lack of credibility that the media has, that they're willing to run with anything without real verification of what they're being told.
Two things go with it. One is you read the statements that's out. I can read that statement two ways. I can see it as pressure, or I can just see it as, hey, I hope you guys get the right decision and leave this alone. But the second thing is there are two federal statutes that if Comey felt pressured, he was required by federal statute to declare that, to announce to his superiors obstruction of justice. He didn't do that. So if he didn't follow the law himself, he's broken the law by not reporting it if it was pressure, or there's a way of reading that memo as I did where I can see it two ways. It's not necessarily pressure. If Comey took it that way, that explains why he didn't report it.
I tell you, the thing that Donald Trump has going in his advantage on this is I don't think he cares about the statutes, the laws, I don't think he cares about any of that. I think he just does what he thinks is what he wants to do. And he probably sat down and said, hey, listen, I mean, he's retired. I don't know. I mean, I would just really hope that you, okay, well, that can be construed as interference. The president should never be anywhere close to saying something like that. But he didn't care. I don't think he's involved in some grand conspiracy or anything else. He just doesn't care.
Well, that was, and it's in regards to a different story about talking to Russia, but he even tweeted out, he said, as president, I wanted to share with Russia at an openly scheduled White House meeting, which I have the absolute right to do. He thinks he can do or say whatever he chooses.
But he does. Yes. He legally does have the right. That's where your hero, that yesterday morning at 6 a.m. we met and you said, Glenn, there's no way this is true because of?
McMaster.
Right? 6 hours later, you're looking and going, well, geez, I don't know. Because what he danced around was he has the absolute right. And what he said in that meeting yesterday was he has the right, and it's wholly appropriate for the president to decide any part of classified information. It's wholly appropriate for him to decide release or not release. And so when they asked, did he do anything inappropriate? No. Well, now wait a minute. You're just giving him a blanket excuse. And so that was kind of the cover that he was running for yesterday. But technically, he's right. He's right.
But I don't like that.
I have to tell you, it's what we said about Hillary Clinton. The law is the law. You have to go by the law. That is the law. And I don't think it was a bad intent, but intent to me doesn't matter. I think he put Israel in a really bad situation, and there's a possibility that that was a smokescreen. Anybody want to address that? Has anybody read that?
Yeah, so that came out that it was in fact Israel. And again, this is I guess leaks through New York Times or whatever still, but it kind of seems like the writing is on the wall for this one. It kind of looks like Israel is the one that gave us the intelligence. The moment that article came out, the Israeli ambassador came out and made this statement. He said, Israel has full confidence in our intelligence sharing relationship with the United States and looks forward to deepening that relationship in the years ahead under President Trump. Now, why even come out with that if it wasn't even true? Like, why would they?
Because of this. You know what it would do to the world if it was Jordan? If Jordan was the one? Remember, what McMaster said yesterday was, you guys know, the cities that are on fire with ISIS. Well, Jerusalem isn't one of those. Yeah. So what he was saying was, you can pick the city. We all know the city. Well, you could have given me 100 guesses and I wouldn't have picked Jerusalem. Now, maybe somebody smarter than me would have, but I wouldn't have. To infiltrate ISIS in a city where an operation is going on, I wouldn't have said it was Jerusalem. I could have said someplace in Jordan, someplace in Syria, someplace in Iraq. That makes sense. Did Israel actually take one for the team and stand up and say, yeah, it was us, when indeed it might not have been them, but they took one for the team?
Former head of Mossad came out. He was the head of Mossad, I think, from 99 to 2000 something. But he came out, and again, it was more rhetoric that seemed like he was kind of confirming it, but he was outraged. He said that we have to make them pay for this. He was like, we have to do something, whether it's cutting them off, them as in us, from intelligence sharing for a certain period of time, or some other measures. But he was outraged, and frankly, I would be outraged as well. But I'm still not completely convinced that it happened the way it seems like it happened. I'm not totally convinced.
Okay, so I want to go back to there, but since we're at Israel, let me jump to David and anybody else who's following what's happening yesterday with Israel.